Something wonderful is happening to me right now. Something wonderful is happening to me right now. I accept things the way they are. I accept things the way they are not. Something wonderful is happening to me right now. I love wasting. I love wasting. I get free. I reap abundantly. I already have everything I need. Wonderful is happening to me right now. Don't you feel it? Something wonderful is happening to me right now. Oh yeah, I accept things the way they are. I will. I accept things the way they are not. Something wonderful is happening to me right now.
So, good morning and welcome to our center.
Good morning.
It's going to be a great service this morning. We're happy to be here.
All right.
Yes, happy Sunday. It's a fabulous, beautiful day here in Las Vegas. Love, 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 love.
Hi, Julius. Hi, Peggy. All right.
Morning. Welcome to the Center of Spiritual Living.
Okay.
Place in your seat and just relax. Become aware of the joy that's around you. Become aware of the peacefulness that is around you. Become aware that you are that peacefulness. You are that joy. And you are because you are one with that which created you. The source of peace, the source of life, the source of joy, the source of compassion, the source of laughter, and the joy of a hug. All of that is what all that you are. And when we come together, as we do and enjoy it so much, we get the opportunity to feel as a community, to communicate as a community, to relax in wonder as a community. And we do that with no questions asked. We do that with no job to perform. All we have to do is be here and to know that we are all one with the joy that created us. And please say with me, and so it is.
So let's just close our eyes and allow yourself to be in this precious moment. Knowing right here, right now, that with heartfelt gratitude, I know there's only one. That one is God. And I know that God is peace, God is love, God is joy, God is infinite intelligence. And in this sacred moment, I stand in this truth, knowing that I am one with all these attributes of God, bringing me to a place of love within, knowing that this presence is in and around and through me, as me is me right here, right now, in this moment. So being in this sacred moment, I let go of everything that no longer serves my best and highest good. Turning my heart and desire to living in a world of peace and love and harmony, knowing that no matter what color, what ethnicity, what I prefer, what I enjoy, it's all one. It is all God. So I let go and step out on faith, knowing that this presence that expresses itself in and through me right now is guiding me for my best and highest good, not just in this moment, but in all moments and at all times. So today, I welcome joy. I welcome peace. I welcome absolute love, knowing that this infinite intelligence is expressing itself in me and everyone that is listening to my voice right now in this moment. And in this moment, I give thanks, heartfelt thanks, knowing that each and every person is here today will hear exactly what touches your heart and soul. I give thanks for each practitioner that praise me up and lift me up to a higher level of consciousness. And I give thanks for each volunteer, for each person that walks in this door that gives of their time to allow this sanctuary, my spiritual home, to run seamlessly. I give thanks for the 3 ministers that I have, knowing that they work with effortless, time-giving, that I have the best that I have spiritually. And for this, I'm very grateful. I give thanks to the technicians and for the people who bring us this joyful music each and every Sunday, knowing that it's from a place of love. So knowing this truth and knowing that today is the perfect day and I'm living it to its fullness, and I know that all is well. So knowing this truth, I have spoken this truth. I now release it, knowing that it is already done, just as I have spoken. And please join me in saying, and so it is. Amen.
Thank you, Miss Patty and Dave.
My pleasure.
And Selena for that beautiful prayer.
That was.
Reverend Patricia for her centering. And Reverend Cheryl for being Vanna White.
Being Vanna White.
I just want to start with saying that in preparing this sermon, have been changed and humbled. The title of my talk is Racism to Gracism. And several weeks ago, I was with one of my colleagues from NV Energy, Shannon Brown. Shannon is a young, intelligent, powerful Black woman. She is a powerhouse, and she is quickly making her way up the corporate ladder. And for work, we happened to be traveling across town, and we ended up in some of the lesser desirable areas of Las Vegas. And our conversation turned to that idea of racism. And I remember my exact words. You know, Shannon, this issue of racism, it's so deep. It's deeply charged with emotion and hate and anger. I just don't know if this issue can ever be solved. I said to her, it seems impossible that this can ever be overturned and healed. And it never amazes me how perfect God's timing is. Because it was just at that time that I began preparing for my talk. And it became clear to me that God had a message for me and wanted to share it with you. And it has to do with that word, impossible. Right. Well, good morning. My name is John Newton. Now that may not mean much to you, seeing how I was born in 1725 in England. My mother was a Puritan, and in my childhood she spent a great deal of time teaching me about the Christian faith. And we read the Bible and we sang hymns and she taught me how to pray. And I loved her dearly. And I was consumed with grief as a small child when my mother passed away. I was 6 years old. At the age of 11, my father, who was a stern sea captain, insisted that I go to sea with him. And I did so for the next 7 years. And I must say, it's not a terribly charming and enriching place to raise a child. You see, I was raised by a village, but it was a village of hard and vile and rude and crude men. And so after many voyages, I did learn many things. I learned how to live recklessly. I learned how to curse with a passion. I learned how to dislike my fellow man. I learned how to disrespect authority of all kinds. And I learned how to drink and party and carouse with the best of them. But the most important thing I learned on the ship was how to curse and to mock God and to heckle and to disrespect Christian believers. My soul became a deep and a dark wasteland. It was funny, at the age of 18, I was disillusioned with everything about life except one thing: the British Royal Navy. And so, without giving it much thought, I joined the Navy. I think I was hoping to find meaning in a life that seemed so meaningless. And what happens when we look for something outside of ourselves to fill us up? I soon became disillusioned with the Navy. And I despised the crew, and I despised my superiors even more. So I did what any fool would do when the time was right and the circumstances were right. I deserted the Navy. My idea was that it was my life and no one was going to boss me around. No one. Not men, not the Navy, and certainly not God. Well, deserting your post and your position in the Navy is a serious offense. And when the naval officials caught up with me, the consequences were significant. I was dragged back to the ship. I was stripped, and I was whipped. 8 dozen lashings. A punishment, an experience so brutal, so painful. You would believe that I would make sure that I would never see that happen to another human being. I was reduced to the lowest rank on the ship, and universally I was scorned by everyone on the boat for 5 years. Only the secret hand of God, I realized later, was the only reason I didn't kill the captain or kill myself. And I hated everyone on that ship, and I expressed that with everything I said and everything I did. I made their lives as miserable as I could. So, the Navy found a way to get rid of me. And it was their good pleasure to turn me over to a slave trade ship that was heading to Africa. And when the ship arrived in Africa, I was taken to a plantation, and I was turned over to the plantation owner's black mistress. And she was not fond of slaves. And it became very obvious early on that she was less fond of the British. And so under her supervision, I was given a rank lower than a slave. I became a slave to the slaves. And over the next 2 years, this woman made sure I suffered. Illness in the jungles of Africa, starvation, physically tortured. It was a punishment and an experience so brutal, so painful, that you would think that I would make sure that that never happened to anyone else. There were a few slaves that were kind, and they would sneak me food. And they helped me send letters to my father aboard boats that were heading to England. And in a miraculous turn of events, my father received one of those letters. And he deputized a captain and chartered him to come and get me. My misery was over. I was on a ship heading back to England. Words that you may have heard in your lifetime: free at last, free at last. And it appeared that on the ship, my luck was starting to change. Not only was I free, but it looked like I was going to start a voyage into financial success. Because I was to become the captain of a slave ship. And it was said of me at that time that I surpassed my earlier immorality and impiety. And that my blasphemous behavior even shocked some of the older men on the boat. I was really good at being really bad. Somehow, even though all that I had seen of the slave trade, even though all that I was subject to as a slave, somehow I believed that the slave trade was an acceptable and honorable industry. We must be careful with the human mind. We have the capacity to justify anything if we aren't careful. When we use just our minds and not our hearts. So yes, I was okay traveling to Africa. I was okay capturing African men and women and children. I was okay with chaining them around the neck and the arms and the legs. I was okay with putting them in containers that were 4 feet tall and 18 inches wide. And I filled the whole of my ship with this human cargo. And I fed them little to no food. I gave them stagnant water, just enough to keep them barely alive. And I allowed thousands of these African beings to suffer for weeks in the hull of this ship. By the time we would reach the plantations, half of them would be dead. The unfortunate other half that lived, we would unload them from the ships, we would take irons to the fire, and we would brand them. And what we would tell them is, these scars you are to look at every day to remind you that you no longer belong to God, but you belong to a man. As time would go on, I was quite successful. I became captain of some of the greatest slave ships that were ever to sail in this trade. My records indicate that I affected, impacted 20,000 African human beings. One thing that I find interesting about my life, all that my mother taught me about the Christian faith, I never forgot what she taught me. And I happened to be on a particular voyage, and for whatever reason, I started reading the book, The Imitation of Christ. Something was stirring in my spirit. It never amazes me enough how God's timing is always perfect. Because on that voyage, as I began reading and wrestling with my faith, it came. A fierce and dangerous storm. The kind of storms that instill in men respect for the sea and respect for its creator. And when I tell you the boat was rocked, when I tell you that the waves would crash over the deck, I'll tell you that the storm was so violent, the whole of the ship was damaged severely. We were taking on water, and it was imminent. There was no question that we were going to die. My best friend and I were standing at the deck, and in 1 minute he was there, and a wave came, and the next moment he was gone. And I was gripped with fear like I had never been afraid before. I grabbed a rope, I tied myself to the ship, and I did something that I had not done in many years. And I prayed, "Dear God, have mercy on me." And in a miraculous turn of events, the storm subsided, and this crippled little vessel made it to port. It was the beginning of my conversion. And over time, I would give my life to God. And eventually, I would come to see the grievous error that slavery truly is. And by God's grace, I would completely abandon the slave trade. And by God's grace, I would be ordained a minister in the Church of England. In addition to writing my sermons, I would write hymns for my sermons. It was the most peaceful time in my day. I would sit for hours in prayer and meditation, and the songs of God's grace would come through me. It was as if God was writing these hymns. I remember one in particular, "Amazing Grace, Amazing Grace."
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a soul like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see.
That little song is the story of my life. And in your world today, it's performed 11 million times a year. As I approach the latter days of my life, I have but two goals. One would be to document my experience as the captain of slave ships, to document the horrors that took place against these people. And the second was to work to abolish slavery in England. Dear God, give me the days and the strength to see these goals come to life. And so I remembered, and I wrote, and I cried, and I wrote, and I wailed from the deepest parts of me, and I wrote. And the time would come when I had completed my writing. I had written my confession the timing of God never ceases to amaze me. Because when I finished my writing a short time after, I had a visitor. His name was William Wilberforce, a prominent young man in the British Parliament. And you see, William too had found God, falling in love with God. He had spent many of his years trying to abolish slavery with no success. You must remember that he was fighting against the most powerful and the wealthiest men in the world at that time. To him, it seemed that this was impossible. So now the young politician comes to see the old preacher for advice. So William, I say, you now have found yourself in a deep relationship with God. And no doubt you are at a crossroads. So let me guess, you have this burning question in your heart. And it's this: should I leave this insane world of politics and the world of men? And should I then go into quiet solitude and prayer with God? Young William, you must do both. Your faith calls you to action. You have work to do, William. I want you to take this. I want you to take it, and I want you to do it. I want you to take them down. I want you to pull their filthy ships out of the water. The streets that line the slave plantations and the factories are running with African blood, and you must clean them up. Take this. My confession, port records, ship records, detailed accounts of the horrors of slavery, and all the names, William, all the names of the slaves on my ship, my 20,000 ghosts. They all had names, William. Beautiful African names. You must take this and publish it and use it. Now go and once and for all put an end to this. I did my share. I kept preaching and I kept praying. And young William, he in fact did publish my work. And he gave it to every member in Parliament. And after tirelessly working the political machine and driving men's minds to what is right, Wilbur put before the Parliament the abolition of the Slave Trade Act. And they were to vote. And we prayed. And we prayed. Noes, 16. Eyes 283. March 25th, 1807. The greatest law ever enacted in England's history was passed. Thank you, God. Well, my work was done. My goals accomplished. And so I left here several months after the law was passed. I went to be with my God and my 20,000 ghosts. After preparing this sermon, I now say to my friend Shannon Brown, this issue of racism, it can be healed. Because what I know is that when we pray for what is right, and we do what is right, and when we know that all things are possible with God, and we believe that, and we have faith in it, then we can, in fact, heal the world. That is God's message to you this week. I love you all very much. Namaste. So if you'll stand and connect. So take a deep breath. And just let, in this moment, let there be a remembering that there is only one power, one presence, one divine, infinite intelligence. There is only one life. And it is my life now. All that God is, I am. I am power, I am intelligence, I am creativity, I am love, I am abundance. And in that knowingness, I must remember that what is true for me is true for each person. And so today is a celebration of oneness. My oneness with all that is, and most importantly, my oneness with each and every person on this planet. So right here and right now, I make a choice. And it is a choice to think about what is right and good. A choice to pray for what is right. A choice to do what is right. And a choice to remember that with God, all things are possible. I give thanks for this day. I give thanks for the knowingness that each person arrives to their next destination safely. And I give thanks knowing that this week, for each and every person, is their best week ever. So now I release these words into the perfect workings of the law. I let go, I let God, and together we say, and so it is.